that that is very much a concern. And I really feel, again, this is something that we can work with our police department on, maybe, you know, taking a look at patrolling routes, the frequency of them, taking a look at, you know, what crime is being committed the most. I think definitely working with the CCPD and the neighborhoods together with your district leaders to try to tackle it and see what can be done within their means. So looking at, you know, the amount of hours for our police task force that are available, where we can fit it in, but make it a priority, where it may not feel like it's much of a priority, but it's part of prevention. I think prevention is where you're going to want to start. You want to make sure that criminals or you know, are deterred from committing the crimes. We don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive to see what we can do to deter the criminals. So I think that goes to working with our CCPD, working with our chief of police to see what they can do to maybe increase a little bit the patrolling the neighborhoods. That police presence really helps. You know, I mean, obviously, when you see patrol cars just kind of driving through neighborhoods, it not only makes your citizens feel safer, but I think it will also do the trick to deter criminals. The more that you see a police, you know, patrolling the area, then you know it's being watched, you know it's being monitored. I think if we can get these neighborhoods more cohesive on that level too, I think that will help too, because you do see the neighborhood watch, and I think that has been an idea that's kind of been lost a little bit because our neighborhoods have kind of grown apart, and I think that just comes with the society itself, you know. But if we can bring the communities, the neighborhoods back together, and maybe revamping the neighborhood watch. You still see those signs. I still see those signs around neighborhoods, and I think that's a great project to try to revamp and revitalize and really put the power back to the citizens in the neighborhood, so that way they can feel safer, but also working closely with our police department.
Well, that's a great question. And I want to also point out, I have been endorsed by the Corpus Christi Police Officers Association and the Corpus Christi Firefighters Association, and I'm very proud of that. I have worked with those organizations for several years, and during my tenure as county commissioner, I had a great relationship with them. We are very understaffed as far as our police department is concerned. There are many studies out. I've visited with our police chief and the president of the Corpus Christi Police Officers Association. They have shown me the numbers where Corpus Christi is well below average in the number of police officers that we have per capita as compared to cities of our size. Corpus Christi also has another challenge in the fact that geographically we're very linear. So we're stretched out across a very long geographic area, which makes it even more difficult for the police and fire people to do the things that they need to do. So I'm going to be very cognizant of that. We need to sit down and fix that problem once and for all. The city now has this plan where they're going to add so many police officers over a 10-year period of time. And if you do the math on that, it'll take us 50 years to get to the point where we have the correct number of police officers for a city our size. So we need to fix that problem, and we're going to have to make it a priority in the budget.
There are two things that I think of when you talk about that. One is the economy, and where you have good jobs, crime tends to go down. So I'm always in there for good jobs and a stable economy. That's part of it, but I don't think that's the main point of what you would be concerned about. The other is with the police force and interaction, say, with the police force and and neighborhood associations to get that communication thing going again. Try to get the police department more involved with neighborhood associations, because that's kind of I'm going to use the word organized effort for communication. And with some of the things we've seen nationally, good communications between the police department and neighborhood associations, I think, is becoming more important. The last thing I want is, and I want to bring this up, there's been a lot of talk about defunding the police department. I'm very reluctant to take a firm position until I have enough information I'm comfortable with it. And up to about 2 weeks ago, I was kind of saying, well, if you want to defund, if you reduce the workload on the police department, yeah, maybe it's, because that's all I could say. Do I know? But I went to the police officers, the police unions forum for candidates, and I learned a few things. And I just put it down. In my view, the city of Corpus Christi is short police officers by about 35, based on the data. Excuse me, I think analytically, and I go through the numbers based on what I heard, but based on what I learned at the Policemen's Unions Forum, I listen a lot. It's important. And based on what I heard, I went through the arithmetic. I take an analytical approach, and I've heard some other, it's hearsay on what's going on in the police department, but that's never enough. And between the hearsay and what I learned, I think we're short 35 police officers.
So here's what's happened. When I served on the Crime Control and Prevention District Board, there was a mandate that 50 additional officers were going to be added to the police force through the funds that were raised from the Crime Control Board. What ended up happening is that 50 officers weren't added. It just turned out that 50 officers started being paid for from crime control instead of from the city. They just shifted the money. And so what has happened over the years is, as our city has grown, the police force hasn't grown. The number has remained the same. And so when we grow the way that we've been growing, we have to enlarge the force. It has to get bigger because there's more that they have to cover. And what needs to be done is that needs to be a priority. You need money if you're going to add more officers, right? And that's always the issue, is that the city says there isn't money. But there are ways to find money. It's prioritizing what you have. It's going through the budget, finding programs or spending that is wasteful and reallocating it. But there's also cost savings. I read a study from other cities that talked about taking the vehicles from the city, like law enforcement vehicles or city vehicles, and starting to go to more fuel efficient vehicles. And by going to more fuel efficient vehicles as they are transitioning to new vehicles, as fleets have to do, they save millions of dollars in fuel costs every year just by using more fuel efficient vehicles. Now, those savings can be used to add those additional officers that are needed. It's not going to add all that we need at once, but it'll start adding to that. And there are other things that we can look at that will give us some savings that we can put back into adding additional police officers and firemen so that we have the protection and safety that we need.
Key to that is to continue to support the efforts that have already been started at the city level with respect to adding officers to the force. So there's a current plan in place to add 5 officers every year for the next few years. And so we acknowledge that we're short officers, so we need to do that first. I think that getting back into what I touched on, is lighting is a big solution potentially to deterring some of that type of behavior. And you know, we can be vigilant as neighbors, and the Facebook group is important, but ultimately at the end of the day, you know, we've got to light up our neighborhoods well enough so that people don't feel comfortable trying to do things that are shady. So I think that addressing lighting is a big part of it. Addressing the staffing at the department is important. You know, we're fortunate to have at least one officer that lives in Lindale that I can think of. So we're blessed in that aspect. But, you know, I think that, again, finding opportunities to increase awareness on I think of the old days, the neighborhood watch programs, and just encouraging neighbors to be vigilant. And I think that all goes back to our conversation about making neighborhoods more walkable, more livable, encourage people to get out and meet the people that they're living next door to.
One of the things that I have addressed earlier, and while current council and past councils, while we talk about beautifying and all of these beautiful projects that they want to talk about doing, they constantly refer back to the direction that the city is going in. Yes, we are growing. We are doing these things. The city is growing. Fine, that is fine. And I want to make sure that the citizens of Corpus Christi understand I am very much pro-growth, but I'm also smart growth. And I also don't want to have growth at more of an expense to the citizens of Corpus Christi. I think we need to be very smart and fiscally responsible with where our money's going. As the city continues to grow, our crime is increasing. Now, crime is increasing, but here's a key factor with crime today. Our crime is becoming more and more sophisticated. What do I mean by that? We have cyber crime. We have cyber trafficking. We have the day-to-day criminals that are out in the street. Theft. We have a whole lot of things, but there is more crime. There's more sophisticated criminals. We have to take a good look at the budget, and we need to identify and find the resources to equip our police department with the people that have the credentials to identify this kind of crime. We have to equip our police department with the equipment that is needed to do that. And we also have to work with our district attorney to make sure that he is not going to be light on some of these crimes. So it's very, very important that we work together and collaborate and make sure that we put bad people behind bars. Our community has to be safe. And in our neighborhoods, we have so many different groups of vulnerable people. We have cyber crime, we have telemarketing crime going on, we've got scams going on that target the elderly. More and more children have cell phones, more and more children have iPads, iMacs. And while they are very astute with the technology involved, the one thing that they're not familiar with is the type of cyber trafficking that's going on that does target our youth. So we really have to be very proactive, very progressive with how we're going to address the more sophisticated kind of crime.
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to address the shortage in manpower with the police. Public safety is one of my big concerns. The defunding of the police will not happen on my watch. There's no way I would ever vote for that. I was endorsed by the Corpus Christi Police Officers Association because of my answers at the forum, because we won't defund the police. There's no way. In fact, we need more police. We need to have an actual aggressive plan to get more manpower due to the shortage. We're about 100 police officers short. So I think by getting more police presence, I think then the crime rate begins to go down. At that time, it would attract more people. It'll attract more people to Corpus Christi, and then show that, you know, we're making a viable effort that we're aware of what's going on, we're aware of what's being reported, but now we're aggressively catching up. So I think it's important. There's no excuse for us to be that low in manpower, because it not only sets fatigue for them, and I do have to say public safety in general, that's the firemen as well, is that they're short and they're not meeting up to standards, because right now they only have 3 per crew, which is a safety factor. They need 4 at all times. So again, so that we're not always just talking about the same issues like the streets. Public safety has to be revamped almost immediately in order for us to get that safety protection out here in the communities. And I think that's one of the biggest things we need to do first, is to revamp it and actually get these people moving.
Oh, this is a hot topic nowadays nationwide, and of course, it's a topic here in Corpus Christi. But my thing is, we don't have enough police officers. I believe the current city council says within 3 to 5 years we'll have 5 more police officers, and I don't think that's nearly enough. We're going outward, and we're getting more people coming down here. And so we need more officers. I remember I'm a legal assistant. And so I deal with CCPD often. And so, I call CCP the non-emergency number, and the same lady answers the phone every day. And so we kind of had a little chuckle, because I said, "Are you always there?" And she's like, "Yes, I am," which makes it, tells me they need help. We need more workers within the department, and we need more officers out on the street. I'm not saying that's that's going to solve everything, but I think if you see more officers in the street, then maybe there will be less crime. But another thing is, like I said before, it pertaining to the homeless and ordinary citizens, there may be something like we need to address, like mental health issues for ordinary citizens as well. And like I said, if you have within a community, like having town hall meetings after pandemic, I think if we get to know one another and we can look out for each other, then I think that would help the police department as well to keep this community safe.
That is one of my main priorities. I mean, I do have a lot of priorities, but that is actually one of the main priorities of my platform and my campaign, because social infrastructure is very important to me. All of the things that were listed are main priorities. I know that the libraries did recently get a bump in their budget, so that will definitely help. And as far as other areas like our parks, I think that going back to the budget, I don't know if you have taken a look at the budget, but it is 218 pages. And it also has amendments because they haven't published the whole budget that was passed yet. When I talked to them a couple weeks ago, they said that it would be about 3 or 4 weeks till the whole budget was ready and put together. So I was able to get the amendments, and I was able to get the proposed budget that was passed. And so it's kind of a monster in and of itself. But to answer your question, we do need to find even those small places where we're wasting money, where we can reallocate that money to social, to the social infrastructure, because all of those little things will add up. And I do want to reference one of the other candidates for city council at large, Mr. Arriaga, did a great post about just cell phones that they found that weren't being used, that, they're able to take those, deactivate and then save some money there. It all comes down to where are the little things that are hanging up in our budget within the city employees, the city staff, that we can cut and reallocate back to those social infrastructure areas, because they do need to be highlighted again. Our library has incredible services that are available. And right now, during the time of COVID, they have done all they can to try to bring those services to you virtually. They do story times virtually. They do a little bit of crafting virtually. If you go and pick up a book, if they have a craft, they'll give it to you. They're doing all that they can, but they need help. And for a long time, our libraries and our parks were put on the back burner. But I think they've realized, especially when it was threatened to cut the library's budget, and they saw the uprising that occurred and the people speaking out and voicing their, their concerns about that, they did see the need for it. So that's another reason why you see that your voice matters, because when you're not using it, they think, oh, it's, that doesn't matter. But once they saw how much these services mattered, they upped the budget. They gave actually to it. So I think the more that we put focus on those areas, our parks are amazing. We need to work at maintaining those. I mean, just mowing. There are some parks that don't get the maintenance that they need. I know that they just installed a few splash pads at some parks. We need to make sure that those are maintained properly, so that way the public loves those. Who doesn't? The kids go crazy during the summer for those. So, a big part of it is not only paying more attention to them in terms of budget, but also maintaining them. So I want to help to put a little bit more focus and see where we can, budget wise, of course, because all of that takes money, even maintaining it. But look, penny pinch through the budget. It's not something easily read, but I'm trying my best with that massive amount of information. But I think finding those little penny pincher areas, because they will add up, and we can do it if we come together and really take a fine-tooth comb to it. We will be able to find the money in our budget to put the proper focus on these social infrastructure areas.
I've been a big supporter of that throughout my political career, both on the school board and with the county commissioner's court. The commissioner's court, we had the ability through our commissioner funding directly to a county commissioner to help with organizations like that. So I contributed money to a number of nonprofit organizations that specifically help social services kinds of programs here in our community. And so I'm big on that. I think it's extremely important. One of the things that I help fund here in the Toloso, Calallen, and the Roy Miller's area, where it was a health fair every year where kids could go get free vaccinations and free health exams and all kinds of things of that nature. And it doesn't cost that much to do that sort of thing. So I'll be big on that. I think it's important. I think one of the things we have to address is the homelessness issue in our community. That's going to be a big part of this, of all cities across this country are dealing with this issue, and we're no different. We have to come up with an answer. We're going to have to, and I don't think we have to provide another level of government to do that. We have to support the organizations that already exist in our community that can help with the homeless problem and who can provide the correct services that those people need. So I think all of that goes hand in hand to help with our problems that we have across the city with crime in our community.
You want money, that to me would be, I'm going to say, adjunct or part of funding you would put across to fight or reduce crime. I don't want to say fight, but to reduce crime and have fewer crimes going on out there. When it comes to what you're talking about, the library and the senior centers, you got to remember it's a little more for senior centers. It's a little bit more involved. I was talking to an individual involved with senior centers, and they pointed out how important it was for the people who retired and don't have much to do, that it helps them to give a place to go and to interact with other people. And he pointed out that when they got some senior centers going, I don't remember when the story was, is their trips to the emergency room dropped. He was saying a lot of your elderly end up going to the emergency room not because they're sick, is they just want to go and talk to somebody or be around people. That kind of impacted me a little bit. So I would view what you're talking about. I'm focusing on the senior centers because that's the one I did a little bit of homework on, is include that or as an ancillary part of funding for public safety or reduce crime.
You know, all of these things play in together, and it kind of brings up a point that is another reason that I'm running, is that we can't do all these things by ourselves, right? We have to work together to solve some of these issues. On the hospital district board, I would see it all the time. We have all these different issues that need to be addressed, and different groups and different organizations are trying to address them by themselves. But when we bring all those groups together to come with a solution, it's a lot easier to do that. And so we do need these programs, but we need to work with other entities to help fund these programs and to help these programs be better. We need to work with the county. We need to work with other services, hospitals, things like that, that have an interest and a stake in our community as well. And we need to work with those groups and those organizations to fund these programs, because the programs do help crime or crime prevention by keeping young people doing other activities, keeping the senior citizens in places that are safe for them, and also where they can be watched during the day as well. So, you know, in the same with the libraries, it acts the same way. So we do need to find the funding for these groups and these organizations, but we have to do it as a community and not just rely on the city to do it itself.
I think that senior centers, you know, and any facility that we provide a safe place for either young or old to go and, you know, enjoy themselves in different way, you know, way, shapes, or form is going to be important. We have to continue to support those. So I do acknowledge and understand that the solution to these problems isn't always in throwing money necessarily at the police department. That being said, you know, I'm proud to say that I was made aware of a program that is in place already at CCPD, whereby they have a mechanism to identify certain calls that may require a different type of assistance or response, and allows them to coordinate with somebody that may perhaps be more trained and more well-versed in mental health type situations, so that they can address those problems in the best way possible. And so making sure that that program, that people are aware of, is important, because I think it's important that people know that we are leading from the front on this issue, but doing what we can to prop those types of efforts up. I was a kid that spent a lot of time at the Boys and Girls Club growing up. I was also a kid that spent a lot of time at Winsale Middle School during the summer programs, the park and rec programs, because, you know, we just didn't have childcare and both of my parents were working. So I recognize the value of those programs and what they did for me, you know, and keeping me off the streets, living on a street on 14th and Morgan, where there was plenty of opportunities to get in trouble. And I think those are things that we have to do as a community, especially because we know that the types of people that are committing these crimes are probably somebody that just didn't have an opportunity to get some guidance maybe at some point in time, or maybe there was a missed opportunity there. And so being somebody that's been involved in leadership development and that kind of capacity for years, working closely with schools and making sure that we have programs in place is something that is super vital to me. As far as financial support, you can count on me to go to bat for those kinds of services, because again, I was a kid that benefited from those services, and I wouldn't be in front of everybody here today if it wasn't.
We need to have and find these resources to really fund these kind of programs. The greatest deterrent to any type of criminal activity is knowing that there is just not one police officer 10 blocks away, but a band of neighbors in a neighborhood that are very proactive with neighborhood watch programs. So we have to fund those kind of programs. If we get our citizens more involved, and there is strength in the numbers, there is strength in the number of citizens that band together, that stick together. That's it. You know, we have 5 fingers, you close them, they develop a fist, and the fist is powerful. So we take that same approach with the citizens in a neighborhood and have the mission, they're an extension of fighting crime. So absolutely, if we need to find those resources, then we need to find them.
I'm 100% supportive of those kind of programs. I'm dedicated to addressing these issues and prioritizing them within our budget without costing taxpayers more money. We're at a point where the budget keeps going up, and it's important we don't cut any programs, especially with the neighborhood or watch programs that we do have in place where, you know, we get together. We used to have meetings. Because of the COVID, a lot of things have been put on the back burner, but that doesn't mean that social media hasn't kept us all intact. But I especially wanted to say I would just prioritize the spending. You guys are expected to pay 100% of your taxes, and you need to get city services at 100%, whether that's programs, that's for libraries, that's for, you know, the splash pad, for the senior centers. It's important that we keep moving that momentum and that shift in the right direction, and we're not cutting any of those programs. Lindale has always had a cool area, and I think that is something that needs to be there for the seniors. When I was on council in 2014, 2016, we had pushed for the senior centers to get kind of reconstructed because a lot of them were dilapidated and had been antiquated. So it was important that we actually revamp them for our seniors. And it's important that we just keep that mechanism of us being a family-like community, so that we can actually raise all of our children, grandkids, and even ourselves at that point where we just start to know one another and be familiarized with everybody. And I think that helps out the entire crime prevention and the fact that we're all communicating. I think it keeps a great open door to everyone, and especially for the council person being in the area or a person at large. I think it's even better so that we have a direct line to us. So again, I would never cut any of those programs. I'm all for it. And I think it's important we just prioritize our spending a lot better.
So we're talking about social services, which involves libraries, park, recreational centers, senior citizens center. Those are things that people like to do. If there's more to do within a community, it stops boredom from happening, basically. And what's happening right now, you know, our city officials, our local city council right now, they want to take money away from those areas. And I don't understand that, especially parks. You know, kids like to play in the parks. You know, I have a grandmother that used to go to the senior citizen center often, and then they started cutting out programs, and they had to find money, you know, personal money to support what they want to do. You shouldn't have to do that. They're taxpayers too. Like libraries, you know, not all kids have laptops or computers. I think you should be able to go to a library and to utilize those things. To me, it doesn't make sense to cut into programs those to me were better. That's a quality of life to me. Those things people like to do. Those things will make people happy. And yes, they will cut down on crime, because a lot of kids, you know, of course, they're doing online schooling right now, but they still out and about. And if there's no things for them to do that's productive, then what they're going to end up doing is getting into trouble. And that's not even just for kids, that's for adults as well. There should be more things to do here in Corpus Christi. I know San Antonio pre-pandemic, they used to have a lot of free things. Around here in Corpus Christi, everything has to be paid for if we have events and stuff like that. And so I don't see that we should be cutting into anything that will help the quality of life and make people have things to do, and then for them to have fun. And that would cut down on crime. Because if they're busy, you know, physically, then it slows down some of that activity of wanting to do something out of boredom. So if I get in there, I'd rather, instead of cutting some off of those programs, I'm going to be pushing more of those programs to help the community as a whole.